Hello, welcome again to Sport and Lot with the full team.
Yeah, I was only with you via the medium of voice note last week, guys, so it's great to be back in the trio.
As ever, we're grateful for you listening to us and glad if you can rate and review us to listen to Martyn Ziegler from the Times, Tariq Panja from the New York Times, myself, Rob Harris from Sky News. So we finally reached the end of the Club World Cup. Probably got a bit more coverage than we might have expected in non-football audiences due to the most prominent fan being there.
Yep, Rupert Murdoch at the Club World Cup final. It was a surprise for all of us. But no, who are we talking about? None other than the United States President, Donald J. Trump. And what a week he's had since that Club World Cup final.
Yeah, that was probably the high point of his week, wasn't it? Hogging the stage along with the Chelsea squad, refusing to leave them to do the celebrations themselves, wanting to take part, causing some of the players to question what he was doing as well. But yes, I think it was downhill from there.
If you're an American sports fan, it might not have seemed as unusual because often the team owners are in those trophy lift moments. So he's probably seen those in the NFL at the Super Bowl. So I thought he was going to be the one part of the trophy lift. In the end, you had Gianni Infantino actually trying to suggest he moves away from it. Tried a couple of times. Do you want to get out of the picture? Then ended up stuck in the middle of the trophy lift.
That's a very generous way of looking at how Gianni Infantino happened to be stuck there. I think another view is a bit of FOMO. Infantino saw, I think, Trump isn't going to go anywhere, is enjoying this. There's a great photo opportunity. I'm going to get stuck in as well. He came charging back in. But yeah, this is the thing. Chelsea, how are the Club World Cup champions? The first time anyone has won this trophy. So in all of the photos of the first trophy lift, in all of Chelsea's historic pictures of the day they won the Club World Cup, Donald Trump's going to be in every photo, isn't he?
Although some have scrutinised some of the images to find ones that Chelsea have posted without Donald Trump in them. I think even FIFA's own X account managed to show some only with the Chelsea lineup. So I think once he'd left, then they did some other trophy pictures.
There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about. So they will, I'm sure, think that was worth the pain of seeing Trump take hogging the stage.
I mean, he didn't stay to the end of the Super Bowl earlier this year. That was seen in part for security reasons. It's quite a long time for Trump to stay. The entire football match, the whole trophy presentation, and of course, quite a long half time as well.
Yeah, clearly he was relishing being there. Not just Donald Trump, but also his cabinet members as well. There was Pam Bondo, the Attorney General. There was Kristi Noem, the Homeland Secretary, his kids. It was the Trump show. And the weirdest thing, or not the weirdest thing, God, there were so many weird things. That would be, the interview he gave to DAZN, which was teased in the halftime and then shown afterwards, broadcast afterwards. The whole thing was strange. It was with I think a 24-year-old influencer, a MAGA influencer. This I'm not sure if she's a broadcaster. I'll keep calling her an influencer. Emily Austin, 24-year-old. The last time I googled her, last time she came to prominence before this, caps the end of Donald Trump's week as well. Funny enough, she came out on the White House lawn saying she had in her hands the Epstein files. What we're talking about, these are the files related to the disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein. And she was there bounding out with these two binders in her hand, white binders. And next thing you know, she's interviewing Donald Trump around the world. It's a bit awkward because we mentioned Rupert Murdoch at the start of the podcast in Donald Trump's box, one of his special guests. By the end of the week, he's suing Murdoch and his newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, for no less than $10 billion after they published a story all about an alleged birthday greeting from Donald Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. We're going to await the outcome of this, but what a strange set of circumstances.
Very strange. And you mentioned that half-time break. I've been sort of banging on about this, but it was 24 minutes. Should have been 15. What do FIFA say about breaking the laws of the game, which restricts the maximum? Nothing.
You became a bit of a clickbait, didn't you?
I tweeted something about it. Next thing you know, there's a story on Sport Bible saying sports reporter questions FIFA over breaking the laws of the game. You don't want to be the story.
It was Manchester City who were fined more than £1 million by the Premier League for breaching the rules around delayed kickoffs.
Who governs FIFA then when it comes to matters like this?
Nobody. Maybe the International FA Board, IFAB, but I mean they have no disciplinary powers.
Or it'd be FIFA, wouldn't it?
FIFA punching themselves, yeah.
Exactly.
So it gets us into the area of how long halftime should be. Previously, there'd been calls to extend it to 20 minutes. Others have said players would struggle then to warm back up again. They need more time. Then FIFA Pro introduced this new call, which is saying actually halftime should be longer to allow players to cool down. And the entertainment itself didn't take that long at halftime. It wasn't on the pitch like it is at a Super Bowl. It was up in the stands.
Yeah, it was a very elaborate and very complex stage that was erected up there in the stadium in New Jersey. And I'll tell you what, from those who were inside the stadium, the fans who were there seemed to enjoy and revel in the entertainment. And I think it kind of goes to show maybe a different type of audience for this type of thing in the States, because I remember being at the Champions League final in London when Real Madrid played Borussia Dortmund. UEFA had a show just before kickoff, and it was right as certainly the Borussia Dortmund fans were in great voice, and they got drowned out by the entertainer Lenny Kravitz. It didn't work for anyone because they ended up with Borussia Dortmund fans jeering Lenny Kravitz, and yeah, his sound, it just wasn't good. It didn't work, and a lot of people said in football you don't really need that type of thing because it's the fans that create the atmosphere, the soundscape for the game. In America, I think a lot of the people at the game weren't regular football attendees and aren't people who are going to be singing songs. So, there's your difference.
And you mentioned that Trump interview. He got quite a lot of coverage about an executive order.
I guess we call it soccer. I'm not sure that change could be made very easily.
Yeah.
But it's great to watch.
What if we make an executive order? We can only say football from now on.
I think we could do that. I think I could do that. I guess this is probably the most international sport, so it can really bring the world together.
I'm sure, as we said, many sports would relish some of that coverage. I've not seen the US president go into the tennis. We have to remember, a lot of the US would not have been caring about this Club World Cup final. They're not talking about soccer much of the time. Domestic soccer isn't getting national attention. So the fact Trump even being seen at the trophy lift and then those images being discussed, even to joke about why is he in the trophy presentation, would have given some wider awareness for a competition that a couple of months ago we were thinking about not many people caring about at all. So probably some sort of a platform to build on now.
FIFA giving the stage now to these leaders is becoming a thing. It'd be interesting to see what happens in the next one. I remember we joked on this pod about whether after the Qatar moment, or what is the Qatar moment? It was the Emir of Qatar putting the ceremonial bisht, the black cape with the golden embroidery on Lionel Messi before he lifted the World Cup, and those iconic images for Argentina, Messi, and Qatar, that Trump would put a MAGA cap on whoever wins the World Cup. And, FIFA seems to be giving this platform now to these world leaders. Football seems to be second fiddle. It's almost a power play for whichever leader is at the trophy celebration. I'm not sure, again, this is what football is supposed to be for. The idea that football and politics are separate, which Infantino uses a lot if you get a chance, I suppose these days, to ask a question about this, he allows these politicians to have this platform.
Or was it a missed opportunity by the teams actually in the final? Paris Saint-Germain, Chelsea. Should the heads of the government from France and the United Kingdom have been there?
No, they shouldn't, Rob. No. It's not a missed opportunity. Don't give them ideas, because we've seen on this pod some of these ideas. Hello, Mr. Watanabe, have come to fruition.
But there was criticism at the Women's World Cup final in 2023 that Rishi Sunak didn't go at the time. There was no Prince William. So we're saying, obviously, that in that sense, then the national team World Cup is bigger than a club World Cup. But if, say, England's men are at a World Cup final, there's no head of government there, no prime minister, would that raise eyebrows? We certainly saw Keir Starmer at the Euro 2024 final in Berlin.
Well, no one's saying don't go. What we're talking about is that moment where these teams have blood, sweat, and tears, months long. It's their effort that should be front and center of this. You know, we shouldn't be talking about this stuff. I know you've mentioned it gives a platform. People, all news is good news, and all the rest of it. Don't forget, it's the efforts of these players that should be rewarded and celebrated.
Yeah, I think it's something that has started. I don't remember it happening previously in World Cups until Macron, I think, was on the pitch, wasn't he, in 2018? He came on with Putin, and then again in Qatar. So I think there's definitely been a sort of a change in the recent World Cups, and I'm sure it will continue.
Infantino World Cups, those all the ones you mentioned are all. Russia was the first one under Gianni Infantino, obviously Qatar, and now this. So maybe that's the change. It's a different president who likes being around rich and powerful people.
And it was Trump who, in his DAZN interview, talked about the Club World Cup final being a political opportunity because, remember, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, Paris Saint-Germain chair, is in the Qatari government, and Trump made reference to Mideast talks and perhaps that being an occasion to meet people from Qatar who obviously are acting as mediators.
Well, Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's Middle Eastern envoy, he was part of that battery of Trump-adjacent figures who were at the game, and he spoke to reporters on the way in. I think made a point of saying he would be meeting the Qataris, whoever they may be, to discuss events outside of the football field as well. But those are the people who do attend football events. But there's others who've been missing them.
Yes, during the Women's Euros, Gianni Infantino was straight back into the football action. And I'm speaking to you from Zurich. He was here at England's quarter-final against Sweden and all the drama of penalties that we saw there. Yes, a very strong delegation turned out from FIFA. In fact, it was their full starting lineup, you might say. It was Gianni Infantino, Matthias Grafson, Arsene Wenger, Jill Ellis, and many more as well. But Gianni Infantino and Matthias Grafson have now been to 2 Women's Euros matches.
That's one more than the president of the federation whose tournament this is, the UEFA president, Alexander Shefferin. He went to the opening game and hasn't been seen since. We're recording this just before the last quarter final, which takes place on Saturday night between France and Germany. Perhaps he'll be there. Perhaps for the last 2 weeks he's had urgent business, and if he's not feeling well, I hope you're feeling better if it's that. But it's been striking that this is one of UEFA's marquee events, and the UEFA president hasn't been there at all, where he was a year earlier crisscrossing Germany for the men's Euros. You know, it's part of the job, one would have thought, to at least be visible, present, and promote your event in some way.
I was wondering if FIFA had decided the reason they made such a show of force is to try and make a point, because there's definitely ill feeling between FIFA and UEFA, and not least over the Club World Cup. So it could have crossed my mind this might have been a demonstration to show, perhaps to try and embarrass him. Do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, could be. And to be fair, this is, for all of the Club World Cup's problems, Gianni Infantino, if you talk to people, feels even more emboldened than he did before the tournament. It happened. the matches were played, a trophy was lifted, the event has happened, and there's talk about it perhaps being bigger, and in a sense, FIFA has won, because who wasn't at the Club World Cup, whose channels didn't promote any of their teams, people are saying, well, that was UEFA. So, and then showing up in their backyard immediately after with the full lineup, as Rob described, is a bit of a look at us, lads. We're here now. So it might be, as you suggested.
Of course, Infantino went to every single World Cup game in Qatar, didn't he? At least some of them, because even the ones that were being played at the same time, he did. He went because of the strange geography. He is able to go from one to another.
Loves a bit of travel.
Gianni Infantino has tended to be in a skybox above the main director's box. Quite a few UEFA officials have been spotted in and around there.
We mentioned it last week, the Crystal Palace and UEFA situation. This is Crystal Palace being banned from the Europa League because of those multi-club ownership rules. And John Texter, there's been some news about emails and letters. You mentioned last week that Crystal Palace, UEFA had written to Crystal Palace at a generic info at email at Crystal Palace, and they may not have seen that. There was a story that caught my eye in relation to this, about the European Club Association writing to its members that this March deadline for MCO might not be so strict. But Crystal Palace, of course, are not in the European Clubs Association and weren't given the information also about how to set up blind trust. There was details from an ECA official there, which is the joint venture partner of UEFA for these competitions. But then I thought, Steve Parish, Rob, the Crystal Palace chairman, wasn't he at the launch of what UEFA and the ECA actually hate this organisation? The UEC, the Union of European Clubs, these groups of small clubs, if you want, outside. And I don't know, it does make you wonder, Mr. Parish, don't cause trouble.
There is a broader point. How often do you struggle to find a contact detail for a football club or any sporting official, let alone at the top, but even just a media contact for any entity around the world?
Yeah, I mean, we do. Hopefully, a sign to maybe put this stuff on a nice email drop-down box.
And to actually put an email address that might be followed up on. When we're struggling to find emails, put one there that actually, if UEFA want to contact you, that is going to land clearly in someone's inbox that they're checking.
Yeah, and Rob, if it's a great opportunity to perhaps tell everyone where they can reach us.
Yes, sportunlockpod@gmail.com or on all the social networks @sportunlocked. Any pitches for multi-pod ownership groups, welcome.
There you go.
Although there might be conflicts if we ended up with another sports news one.
Well, we need a blind trust to sort all that out.
Well, the Women's Euros goes on. The Club World Cup is over. We probably should be talking about things other than football in the summer. But maybe some athletes who prefer we're not talking about them. Quite a big doping case.
Yeah, this is the women's marathon record holder from Kenya, Ruth Chepngetich, who she broke the world record in Chicago in October 2024, and she's been suspended after failing a drugs test for a diuretic called hydrochlorothiazide, HCTZ. This is the Athletics Integrity Unit have done this. Another sort of embarrassing, sort of concerning thing for Kenyan athletes, distance runners, Tariq. You've been to Kenya.
Yeah, I have. And look, this is another massive name in world athletics, one after the other. It is a real worry. If you look at the Athletics Integrity Unit, the body that does doping for world athletics, if you look at their data, it's almost like 6 pages now of currently banned Kenyans, runs to I think, nearly 100. And those are the ones that have been caught. So, if you talk to them, this is almost a good thing, because 2 or 3, 4 years ago, these people were not perhaps being tested in the same way they are, not being caught in the way they are. So it's a complete disaster on the face of it. But you can imagine the level of cheating that is happening to run to 6 pages, and another major world athlete being caught from Kenya. Um, I don't think there is a way of this is going to stop. As you said, I went there. The level of poverty that I witnessed is astounding, and the level of potential gains from just doing okay in long distance running, which is the most lucrative of any athletic discipline, marathon and half marathons and 10Ks. This is regular income. There's always a marathon somewhere in the world. These guys, the idea might be, so what if I get caught? I've got nothing to lose. I have nothing, no other way of earning income. And this is the challenge for those running world sports.
She was due to run the London Marathon in April, but then was able to put a statement out through the organisers saying she wasn't in the right place mentally or physically. Well, probably is right, but not partially right, but not the full story.
Yeah, we know what was happening now. They're not in the not in the mental state, not in any state. But look, this is going to keep happening.
But the statement through London Marathon was able to say, "I am withdrawing," but we knew by that point she'd already been suspended.
Right. Yeah. So thank you for letting us know, Ruth. But guys, it's going to keep happening. See, it's going to be could be next week, could be in a few weeks, few months. Guarantee you'll be writing another story or the paper about a major Kenyan athlete being dinged for doping. That just the factors are all there. Whether it's poverty, whether it's huge competition among an athlete class that's training up there up in the Great Rift Valley, and then access to pharmaceuticals. There's pharmacies absolutely everywhere. So
yeah. And endurance events where the Kenyans are particularly good at are the ones where you actually get perhaps the biggest benefits from doping.
This was discussed around the time of the big Russian doping scandal, whether there should be a wider investigation and inquiry into other parts of the world. And does Kenya open itself up to that?
Well, it has. It has opened itself up to it. And Kenya, a couple of years ago, was threatened with a worldwide ban like Russia unless it spent $25 million over 5 years into doping. And for a country like Kenya, that is enormous. It agreed. And there is special... More Kenyan athletes are tested on a per capita basis probably than any other nation in the world right now when it comes to track and field.
Well, we'll see if those calls do grow to a wider investigation into it, because there are deep-rooted issues, and this is another high-profile case. We talk a lot about football finances on this pod, but rarely rugby union. But there are so many financial issues in that sport. At the time, we're focused on the British and Irish Lions tour of Australia, but just what state is the sport in financially in Australia, one of the huge rugby nations?
Yeah, 20 years ago, you'd have thought rugby union was they were one of the powerhouses, very strong national team. Things have been slipping a bit, and the Lions tour there. In some ways, it's important for Australian rugby union, but in other ways, I think if they get sort of easily beaten in all 3 tests, then that could be a setback. So it's a bit of a sort of balancing act for them.
Yeah, the Lions tours to Australia, the idea that the results were definitely in the balance, or the Lions will go in there as even underdogs, that a generation or so ago was distinctly possible. It'll be, I think, a major shock if the Lions don't come back with a series victory from Australia, because the state of Australian rugby union is not what it was. The strength of it is not what it was, and some of the data here would tell you, it plays very much third fiddle to the other oval ball codes. Australian rules football is massive in the country, particularly in its heartland and sort of Melbourne in that area in the south. And then rugby league is huge as well around Brisbane and the northeast. And the TV differentials, the rating, the TV rights deals will make are startling when you hear them. So rugby league has got a $2 billion Australian dollar. That's about almost £1 billion 5-year deal for its competition, and they're hoping the next one's going to hit 3 billion. Australian Rugby Union, its latest deal, which is double what it had before, is Australian 240 million, which is just over 100 million over the 5 years. This is like 8 times difference. So you can almost feel like the interest levels and the financial levels are so different. It tells you why the game is in the state. Some clubs have gone bust. Big rugby union teams have gone bust. And I remember going to the All Blacks game at the MCG while we were there, Rob, covering the Women's World Cup in Australia. And I was like, I was really excited about getting to cover this. It was All Blacks, Wallabies, MCG, first time in 20 years. And it was not a full stadium there as well. So I was quite surprised. Also, the media interest, it wasn't huge. There wasn't that many journalists inside the stadium either. So yeah, this is a very different backdrop to what it would have been a generation ago.
Probably something we talk about quite often on here, sports that aren't football not doing enough to promote themselves, and rugby certainly is in that case. It can seem like it's talking within itself, not expanding its audience in terms of trying to raise the profile of the athletes to bring a wider audience in. Particularly given the fact we started this pod talking about the Club World Cup, football now massively dominating in...
Robbie there?
We started the pod talking about the Club World Cup, football just completely dominating. And we're seeing with the Women's Euros just how big that is in a market like Britain, where rugby union was so strong. So, yeah, what will rugby do to help itself going forward?
Are you suggesting they get a US president over for a trophy celebration?
Well, they would certainly get a lot more attention. I mean, rugby union has gone to the US to try to build a market. Was it the All Blacks who played in Chicago a few years ago?
Well, rugby league as well. They had their they had a couple of games there in Las Vegas, and I think they got decent crowds quite recently. Everyone trying to crack the US market. Bit of a cliche that.
The Men's Rugby Union World Cup will be in the United States in 2031, but probably Trump won't be president. Well, not Donald Trump.
Yeah, or hang on. I think all bets are off as to what happens in the US at the moment. Everything is possible. What's also possible when you think, wow, we got the World Swimming Championships taking place in Singapore coming up. And Stephen Wade, a good friend of ours, works for the Associated Press out there in Tokyo. He's going over to Singapore to cover the swimming championships. He sent me a story this week, and I had to read it a couple of times. A 12-year-old Chinese swimmer, the headline says, is taking stunning times to the World Championships. This is the remarkable story of UZD, 200-meter butterfly swimmer, who is 12 years old, but also one of the fastest globally at her sport, and with her quickest times would have just narrowly missed a bronze medal at the Olympics in Paris. She's also competitive in the 400 meters individual medley, close to podium pace there. So something to keep your eye on, or someone to keep your eye on. 12-year-old Chinese swimmer at the World Championships. Incredible.
And it does obviously raise some questions about whether major events should be allowing a competitor in who is so young.
So World Aquatics, it's got regulations that require swimmers to be at least 14 years old to compete, unless they achieve qualifying times that meet elite performance standards. Use times have met those, allowed her to bypass this. That just tells you how fast, how do China produce these incredible young swimmers as well. I'm sure other nations will be wondering the same as the championships begin.
Well, something we haven't spoken about for quite a bit is the status of Russian and Belarusian athletes in sport. We might have expected more progress on this. It looked like at one point things were speeding up. Maybe it's obviously back to Donald Trump attempting to end Russia's war on Ukraine, which might have smoothed the path back into sport for Russia. But obviously with the war going on and no sign of any peace deal has sort of stalled those efforts. But fencing is bringing Russian and Belarusian athletes back in with quite a backlash.
Fencing, which was famously presided over for many, many years by Alisher Usmanov, the Russian oligarch close to Vladimir Putin, who's now been sanctioned in Europe and the United States and Great Britain, has always been close to fencing, I suppose, the Russians. Rob, there's been a lot of disquiet over this, right? Letters written, complaints filed.
Yes, Global Athlete have a letter from over 400 international fencers opposing it. They talk about their deep concern and disagreement with the decision. They say that sufficient safeguards haven't been provided to ensure that the competition isn't used in a way to undermine the integrity and neutrality of the sport. So this is quite a strong letter. You know, they recognise that it's a complex and sensitive situation, but they question whether the conditions that justified strict eligibility standards for Russian and Belarusian athletes have genuinely changed, because there's one particular focus on a Russian army general who's going to be at the fencing worlds.
Yeah, that's going to leave a bad taste. Well, war is still very much raging in Ukraine, and it's one of those that we have no end in sight for, sadly.
And it is an issue confronting most sports around the world. As ever, if you want to ask us anything, got some feedback, questions, you can message us at Sport Unlocked. Direct message us on social platforms or sportunlockpod@gmail.com. Now, thank you for listening. Goodbye.